The 2024 version of The Crow was directed by Rupert Sanders and stars Bill Skarsgård as Eric Draven, a man who has been through a lot in his life, and when he meets Shelley, played by FKA Twigs, he finds a reason to keep going. Eventually, the two of them fall in love and they have a wonderful relationship. However, some aspects of Shelley's past catch up to her, and both her and Eric are murdered. However, Eric comes back to life as a vengeance-seeking vigilante to take revenge on those who killed her, and that's about the gist of the movie. This is obviously not the first adaptation of The Crow. This is based on the comic book series of the same name, and there have been movies made in the past, but the most significant of those, of course, is the 1994 movie directed by Alex Proyas and starring Brandon Lee, who unfortunately died in the making of the movie after a prop gun failure. God rest his soul, he did an excellent job in that movie. And so naturally going into this one, which is a reboot, not a remake, it is very much taking its, the original story and doing its own thing with it. It's understandable to be skeptical, but this is one of those things where I try to always keep an open mind, because you never really know how an adaptation could turn out. Maybe you'll be pleasantly surprised. And so I went in with the expectations of, let's see how it plays out. And there are a couple of things that I think weren't too bad. There's one action scene that's been advertised a bunch, which is the opera scene. That wasn't so bad. There's a whole fight that happens as Eric is making his way up and just taking out people one after the other. Lots of blood, guts, and gore, and there's some really fun stuff that's done when it comes to taking out some of those guys. Like there's a couple of points where he shoots or stabs through himself because he can't die. And those moments were kind of creative. Like there's a couple of gnarly kills in the process. And Bill Skarsgård himself was not too bad. He did a fine job in the movie. I thought he was doing all right, even though some of the line reads were not as great. And that's it. Beyond that, this movie is kind of a train wreck. I didn't really like a single other thing beyond those couple of beats. And the rest of it just fails across the board. Now I know what you might be thinking. I love the 1994 movie, hell, so much so that I have the 4K of it that just came out recently. In fact, I talked about this movie on my channel. Check out that video. But rest assured, I'm not even thinking of that right now. Because like I said, it did things very differently from that version of the movie. I am looking at this very much in its own, for its own merits and seeing it for what it is. But even in that specific case, this is not a good adaptation of that material, and a lot of that just has to do with how dull and lifeless it feels. There is so much vibrancy to what you can do with this world, especially when it comes to a story as dark as this. Some of those elements those juxtaposition of those things are what make The Crow so fascinating and Eric Draven so compelling as a character. A lot of that, unfortunately, is just not in here. And the script doesn't do Skarsgård, who is trying his best, any favors in that regard. You get brief little tidbits here and there of who he is and the life that he's had, but beyond that, there's nothing that is there that's emotionally worth holding on to. I don't want to do too many comparisons to the 94 movie, but one thing that I will say about that is that while it also gives you flashes of certain things when it comes to the life that Eric Draven had with Shelley, at the same time, there are aspects of what is there now that tie him into it. Like, there are emotional connections that still end up working as well as they do. Like his connection with Sarah. There's a few moments that you get with those two characters that are extremely beautiful. And those are enough to really carry things through. That's not the same thing over here. Despite the fact that you get a very extended romantic subplot with Eric and Shelley. It plays out the entire way through, from when they first meet to eventually being together to, finding out that they are meant for one another, and then eventually their tragic murders. And yet at the same time, I feel like the movie just doesn't give you enough to work with in that respect. There is one aspect with Shelley's character that tries to overcomplicate certain things, eventually leading into the movie's villain Rogue, played by Danny Houston, who equally doesn't get much to work with. In fact, I would say the biggest culprit of the script sort of ends up being him. He plays a very one-note villain who is, this powerful guy who can make things happen in a certain way and says some of the most laughable dialogue of the year. There's at least 2 or 3 different moments in the movie where he'll have a line, and I swear, my friend can attest to this at the screening. I was trying so hard not to laugh super loudly. And I was trying my best. It was just very, very bad. In fact, he was also just chuckling on the side. It's not great stuff at all. One of the other issues that I had with this movie, and this is probably another comparison point, is the soundtrack in this is not used very well. That's something that the other adaptation did pretty nicely. They were able to tie the music into what was going on in the movie, especially when it came to Eric's past as a rock musician, that aspect of him, whether it came to him playing the guitar on the rooftop or the music playing in the club, it all sort of tied in together. There's none of that in here. The needle drops that are in this movie are very randomly placed. And a couple of them really don't work with the entire movie. There's one that kind of works, and it's towards the end of the movie, which I thought, okay, that's not so bad. That's it. That's the only one that I thought really did a good job of working. But one of my biggest issues with this movie is how much it tries to over-explain certain things. Every aspect of it needs analysis. You try to go too much into trying to justifying every single creative choice or whatever is going on in the supernatural sense with Eric. And I think that's a big mistake because it kind of takes away from the mystique of it all, especially when it comes to how he comes back. When he's asked about it in the 94 movie, his response is, I don't know. I have no idea how I'm back. I just am. And that's all. The whole idea is that it's built on this revenge path of getting those who killed Shelley. That is really what it's all rooted in. And over here, there's too many times where the movie tries to justify that. It's okay, so here's how the rules of this limbo world where you're trapped in work, and how a crow is able to bring you back, and how the mechanics of it work when it comes to soul transference and all that. It's wait, we don't need all this. I mean, at the end of the day, the only thing that should be guiding this is that he loves her. And unfortunately, that's also something that suffers because despite spending a lot of time on the romance between Eric and Shelley, there's not a lot of chemistry that's between FKA Twigs and Bill Skarsgård. And that really upsets the entire movie's storytelling because when he's on the warpath for his love for her, you kind of have to go, but we didn't really feel that love as much as I think they wanted us to. And I feel like that is a crucial error in the entire movie's framework, that it doesn't manage to pull that off. And so by the end of the movie, I didn't feel like I felt anything, and I didn't feel like I really got any kind of proper payoff to certain things. There's a couple of cool moments, but really that's about it. Beyond that, the movie is just a very messy experience and not one that I particularly enjoyed. And I can't really say I would like to see it again. I don't know how people are going to receive this. Maybe you'll like it a lot more than me. If you do, fantastic. More power to you. And that's totally fine. That does happen. And again, want to make clear, I'm not saying this with affinity or love for the original, 1994 movie. It's not just that. That movie did what it had to do. This movie is doing what it has to do. It's just not doing that thing very, very well. And overall, I was just not a fan of it. And if you ask me right now what my least favorite movie of the year is, I might actually go with this. And so far, Madam Web and a couple of other things, maybe Borderlands, like a few weeks ago, we're batting for that. But now, yeah, I think this might actually be genuinely worse than those two. I'm gonna give The Crow 2024 a 4 out of 10. pretty much just about escapes a full, like, F rating. 3.5 was an F. So, yeah. Guys, thank you very much for watching. I mean, like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed more than I did, but we'll see about that. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe. Thank you very much once again, and I'll see you guys at the movies.